Hi, I'm David Gregory. I'm the CEO of the Small Business Institute. Today we're speaking with Anthony Turner. Anthony is the Business Development Manager for the Institute, but he's also the author of Are You Ready? And a number of other books. He's also worked with many thousands of businesses across the state. So, Anthony, welcome to the interview couch today.
Thanks, David.
Okay. So today, Anthony, we want to get a bit of an insight into ways that we can help small business.
Sure.
So can you give me a bit of an understanding of what sort of issues face small businesses and what they can do to try and achieve the success they desire?
I think in all the work that I've done, David, I've found that it typically comes down to two main problems where most businesses fail to reach their full potential. And the first one of those is that oftentimes they've either don't have clear goals or they've lost sight of the goals of why they went into business in the first place. And the second one is that they don't really know what's going on in their business. I mean, they turn up every day, they do the work and everything else, but they don't understand the things like the metrics of what make their business tick. Are they getting the right number of customers and all those things? And it's that lack of understanding of what's really important in their business is what lets them down and why they don't get the success that they desire.
So how do they overcome issues like that, Anthony?
Look, we've played around over many years, and I've come up with what I call the 5 pillars, which sounds a bit Greek and ironic, but it seems to work. The first one of those is very much where are you at, and I'll come back to them individually and give you a bit more detail. Where basically it's just an overview of knowing where you're actually physically at all the time. The second one is to be very clear about where you want to get to, which is the direction. The third one is to decide how much money you've got to make in your business, and get clear about what are your expenses, what are your needs to live on, and all those sorts of things.
It's a critical element, but such an important one.
Yeah, absolutely. And most people, when they go into business, actually don't decide their income.
Yeah,
they work on the income that's left over at the end of the day. The fourth one is to get out there and tell the world. It's too easy to be good at what you do, but sitting in your office or in your shop and everything else, and nobody knows you exist.
Too much time living in rather than working on
the business. Exactly. And the fifth element, I believe, is probably the most critical one, and that is to manage for success rather than to avoid failure. And by that I mean it's about understanding what are the important things to manage in the business, and managing and working on those things rather than just all the stuff that takes up your time.
So can you give us a little bit more detail on each of the pillars?
Sure. Look, the first one, know where you are. Realistically, this means being very cognizant about a number of things, and ways in which I've done that with clients is we actually give them some analysis sheets where they can go through, and we look at it from two different perspectives. So we look at, first one is the individual. Does the individual who's running the business have all of the skills that they need? Do they have all the resources that they need? Those could be financial resources, that could be knowledge resources, that could be just people resources to actually assist them in the process. Are the family on side? Do we know enough about things like the legals, the finances, are we comfortable about selling? So we really do a bit of a diagnostic to understand where the individual is at. Conversely, we then go through a similar sort of diagnostic, but this time it's about the business. What is the business missing? What is the strengths of the business? What are the things that really are in place well? And within the business, do you have things like intellectual property? Is that protected? Do you have legal sorted out? Have you got the right business structures? Have you are the accounting systems in the right place?
Sure.
Or are you a bit like some of the tradies that I've come across, where accounting? That's the time where I take the bag or the box out to the car, scrape all the receipts off of the dashboard, and take them off to the bookkeeper.
Or the cash register, where you go and grab $20 from there, and never the accounting twain shall meet.
Exactly. And so that's fundamentally knowing where you are, but it's not just a one-off instance. It's about knowing where you are constantly, and analysing the various things like, my business is now growing into a new direction. Do I need new skills? Who do I train up? Is that me? Is that one of my staff members? Is it a family member? How do I keep building on these, or how do I fill those knowledge and resource gaps? Maybe through things like the mentoring service. It could be consultants at different times. It could be outsourcing work to experts, so maybe the bookkeeper or a graphic designer, web designer, whatever it may be. But it's not attempting to do it all yourself. It's knowing what you're good at, sticking to those things, and getting help in the areas where you're not. The second element is knowing where you're going, and this is really, really, really fundamental. If you think about if you're going on a trip somewhere, what's the first thing that you do? What's the first thing you decide?
You have to seek to understand where you're going, and in order to seek where you're going, then this is where you're saying a strategic plan is needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you think about if you're going to take an overseas holiday, the first thing you do is you decide the destination, and then you go out and you do some research. So you research where you're going, what are the activities that are there, what sort of food is there. Is it the sort of place that I can go to where shopping is so cheap I take an empty suitcase and fill it up over there and bring it back? Do I need inoculations? What's the best time of the year to go? All the different things. And then as you build through the process of that research, you might go and get the inoculations. You then go to the travel agent, you book your tickets and your accommodation and everything else, and the travel agent gives you an itinerary. Now, the itinerary for a trip is no different to a business plan for a business. It's a fundamental tool that every business owner needs. Within that, the key point, though, is you're clear about the destination. And when we're looking at the pillars about where are you going, is sometimes that is building that business with a destination of actually getting out of the business. And I think most business owners go into business, and they fail to think about how they're going to get out of their business at some future point. There's quite a lot of people that I've come across who think, oh, look, I'll leave it to the family and it can be the kids' worry. But the bottom line is oftentimes the kids don't want it. They don't want to know. They've seen how much time and energy it's taken out of you. Why would they want to do that? Yeah. You're either going to set a real goal, have what you want the business to deliver, and how you're going to get out of that business, or you're going to get caught up on what I call the hamster wheel, where you're working in the business day after day after day after day, and it becomes a chore rather than a joy.
Sure.
So
So the third pillar?
Third pillar is decide your income, and I really do mean decide your income. As I said earlier, lots of people get caught up on the paying all the bills, and if there's some money left over, well, that's what I've got to eat on. And one of the core things about deciding your income is understanding how much money you need to live. Now, a lot of people don't realise that for a typical family of 2 adults and, say, 2 kids, it typically takes about $100,000 a year of net income to support that family. The cars, the school fees, the house mortgage and all of the food and the entertainment, all the bits and pieces they go. If that's the amount that you would typically getting as in a partnership, in a relationship, from jobs, then one of you is going to actually drop out and work for yourself. Then it's important to understand that your share has to come out of that business as a minimum.
Sure.
And ideally, you would be looking to provide the full amount out of your business. Now, you won't necessarily do that in the beginning, but you will certainly do that over time. I think it's also important to look at what are the costs of running your business. And this means doing some of the things that people hate to do, and these are the things like cash flows and budgets. Budgeting is probably one of the best ways of understanding what your needs are for your business. And most people who have done budgets understand that typically you've got income at the top, then you've got all the expenses and plus or minus at the bottom. Mm-hmm. Did I make money or did I not? But I don't think that's the best tool. It's a good tool to analyse what's happened, but I don't think it's the best tool to predict what you require. So one of the processes we use is we turn it upside down and we go through all of the expenses, and sadly the list is no shorter. But one of the items that we do add in there is the wages, and that is the wages not just for the staff in the business, but a separate line as wages for you as the business owner, is what you would be taking out of the business.
So the way you're suggesting that makes it a lot clearer for people to understand what the true costs of their business are before they get to that profit margin.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, if you understand what the costs of business are, that will actually tell you how much business income you have to generate.
Yeah.
Whereas the other way, you're just doing some guesses. One of the other things that people fail to plan for in their businesses is where they're going to get profit to grow their business. Mm-hmm. So one of the elements that we put onto these cash flows and budgets is an element of profit for growth. If you don't do that, you're relying on several things. Either couple of things are going to happen. One is that you're either going to have to pull it out of your own resources by borrowing money or something like that, or you can rely on what I call the Tats Lotto method, which is that it turns up when you need it most, but invariably that never happens. And the third element is that if you're looking to grow your business and you've got additional costs, the only other place that's going to come from is the amount of money that you're going to take out of the business or not take out of the business to actually satisfy the business. Once you know what those numbers are, so if you know what your expenses are, you know what your wages are, put on an element of profit to grow the business. That will tell you the total amount of profit you've got to generate over the course of a year. Then you can divide that by the number of hours that you are going to be servicing clients to understand what you've got to charge. Or if you're selling product, you've got to add on the cost of goods of those products, and that will tell you what your sales figures are going to be. And from that, you can work out things like your break-evens, you can work out KPIs, key performance indicators of what you need to do in terms of how much profit you have to generate and all these things, which give you the tools further down the track to be able to manage your business.
So this approach is not dissimilar to the roadmap for strategy or for business planning. It's
Absolutely.
a roadmap for your finance to say, understand your costs and progressively work down to find out how much money I've got to make.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. And then how do you actually get the sales? So pillar 4.
Pillar 4 is get out there and tell the world. As I said before, you can have the best business in the world, but it's just a secret if nobody knows about it and you're not out there telling anybody. Yet it's probably the element that most business owners do worse. I think there's some psychological reasons behind that, and I'm not a psychologist, but I think too many times people are fearful of rejection, and therefore they're not game to put themselves on the line and to talk about themselves or their business. The other thing is that when they do go out, whether it's through networking or advertising, there is a very common trap that they fall into, and that is that they're very passionate about their idea and who they are, and they tend to talk about what we have rather than what we have, what does for somebody. See, as customers, we don't buy products, we buy solutions to issues that we have. And I'll give you an example. I was doing some work with a client who did radio advertising, and he was a natural health therapist, and he was actually working on chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. And he had some radio ads that he was running, and which were quite successful. And they basically were, this is who we are, this is how we've helped people, and this is for chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, and here's the phone number. Now, you may think that sounds okay, but if you think about it, somebody who's got chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, that's where their radar is. They're looking for answers to that particular problem. We just made a small tweak with his advertising, and we put, do you suffer from chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia at the front of the radio ad?
So it's turning it into the what's in it for me component.
Absolutely.
And leading with that.
Absolutely. Because I've got to connect to you in what you're interested in, not what I'm interested to sell. Because the truth is, none of us like to be sold to. With the radio ad, just that simple change of putting that up front gave people with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia time to go to pick up a pen and a piece of paper to write down the number because they knew it was coming, and he increased the return on his advertising by 230%.
Fantastic.
That
simple advice, but really helpful. Yeah.
But you sort of touched on something else, about the what's in it for me. And as I was saying before, it's really about we as businesses are there to help our clients solve their problems, not to get out there and flog what we want to flog. There's a rule, or there's a thing that we've been working on recently, it's some research that we did. We found that most people see between 3,500 and 5,000 messages every single day.
It's an extraordinary number, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. But it's not hard to imagine when you think about when you get up in the morning and after you've been to the bathroom, as we normally do, you go to the pantry and you open the doors, and what are you confronted with? All of these packages which are advertising
well,
messages.
Even in the bathroom before you get there, it's the toothbrush and the toothpaste. Absolutely.
So all of these things. While you're having brekkie, you might be listening to the TV or the radio, and you've got advertising there all the time. You might be flicking through the newspaper. You've got advertising there all the time. We haven't even left the door yet, and we're bombarded with all these messages. And what's happening is that people now have glazed over. We don't hear the messages anymore. And this is why it's, marketing has now moved out of, from what used to be what we term broadcast marketing, where, hey, we've got, glasses of water, anybody want to buy a glass of water? And if you shout it enough times, some people will buy it. Now you've got to engage with people in their own space and give them reasons, about why you are the best person to deal with and everything else. But it's not selling, it's about solving their problems and building up the trust so you're engaging the people to come to you. And that's where marketing has really changed. And that doesn't matter whether that's in the offline or the online world. The key thing about marketing today is it's got to be customer focused, not business focused.
Absolutely. And the final pillar?
The final pillar is to manage for success rather than to avoid failure.
It's an interesting phrase, so tell me about that. Yeah.
Managing for success means understanding the things that are really, really important in your business that need to be managed versus all of the stuff that is just tasks that are there to be done. You've probably heard of the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, where 80% of your results typically come from 20% of your activity. What I've found to be true is that the more successful business owners understand what is the 20% of things that really make a difference to their business versus the 80% of things that take up their time. And they focus the predominant amount of their energy, their money resources, and their time resources onto those things that make the most difference. So in a business, it could be that, marketing is probably one of the key things that people spend too little time on, but that's the thing that attracts people into the business. Mm-hmm. If you're a computer technician, it's very easy to be fixing computers, but once that computer's fixed, where's the next one to fix going to come from? In other areas of the business, it could be about staff. If you've got staff, it's, do you actually spend good time and money educating, training and developing your staff? Because that means they're going to be better. What are the elements? And this is going to be different for every type of business and for every business owner. But it's really coming down to understanding what are the things that are the most important things for me to be using my time on. And then how do I outsource or get staff or whatever to do the other tasks? And one of the things when I'm doing training sessions we talk about is many people use task lists. And I remember my wife, I should say my ex-wife, used to have a task list for me. It was on the fridge and it was all the chores that had to be done at the weekend. And I remember one weekend getting very disheartened because there was this great long task list and I went out dutifully in the morning with the old jeans and boots on and got out there and I came back at lunchtime and I scratched all these things off of the task list and sat down to have my lunch, and then as I'm having lunch she's writing another 10 or 20 on the bottom of this list, and I realised these things are never ending. But the smarter business people, what they've done is they go back to those things that are most important and they create what I call checklists. So these are the critical things that must be done. Mm-hmm. This is the following up the money coming in. This is making sure the invoices go out. This is doing the certain number of sales calls every week or every day or every month. And
if it's written down, you do it.
You're more likely to do it.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't mean you get rid of the task list, but the task list is all the stuff you do after you've done the things on the checklist. Right, yeah. And that's where you can keep yourself focused as a business owner on the things that are most important for the business. So that's what we mean by managing for success rather than to avoid failure. The avoiding failure is doing all the stuff that takes up your time, keeps you on the hamster wheel, and you wonder why you're in business.
Okay, excellent. Thanks very much for your time today, Anthony.
You're very welcome.